Hey guys, Mike from the WCA. We're going to take a look at a game that was played in the mid-70s in Poland between two grandmasters. Playing white was a grandmaster named Ilievski, and a guy named Paul Grau was playing the black pieces. The reason we're showing the game is it's a great example of attacking chess, but it also comes from an area where a lot of our students are having trouble, and that namely is what to do once you get your pieces developed and you get them out. You kind of feel you have something in the position, but you're not quite sure where to go next. This is a perfect example. So black kind of helps white out a little bit here. So he made several mistakes, but it's instructive to see how his position got weak in the first place, especially when you're talking about scholastic players, because as you'll notice in the game, black loses a lot of time. And we're not talking about time on the clock. We're talking about moves or tempos. So in chess, when, for example, if you have to move a piece 3 or 4 times and you don't really accomplish anything with those moves, you're wasting time. So in your tournaments, if you happen to hear another player say, yeah, I gained 2 tempos against somebody, that pretty much means that they got their opponent to waste 2 moves. So let's check out the opening here and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so it begins as a French defense, the pawn on e6, and we'll kind of breeze through the opening moves, knight to d2. And the most common move in this position is to play maybe knight f6. There's several different things black can do, but one way to go is to immediately take white's pawn in the middle. And the idea is to kind of lure this knight into the middle and then challenge it with one of your pieces and do a little bit of trading and kind of ease the cramp on black's position, because the upside of playing this way is you might be able to force some exchanges and get a very solid position, but the downside for black is that you immediately have less space. And try to recall what we talked about in earlier discussions. Space is determined by the distance your pawns create from their starting box. So here is the starting line for white. You can see the mouse cursor going back and forth. Notice that white's lead pawn, or the furthest pawn, is on the 4th rank here, the 4th rank, and black's is only on the 3rd. Now ignore the number 6. This number 6 is really only for notation purposes. From black's side, this is the 3rd rank. 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Because their pawn is only on the 3rd rank and white is on the 4th, white has more space. You can kind of see there's more room to maneuver down here than black has. So one way to play a position when you have less space is to make trades, because the more trades you have, the less likely your pieces are going to run into each other. You see, if you have a lot of space like white has, you want to keep pieces on the board because you have more room to work with them. Less space, you generally want to encourage trades. So what black does in this position is he encourages or tries to force a trade immediately, but it's not considered to be the best way for black to play. So what he does is he immediately plays knight f6 and says to white, okay, let's trade a piece. And it's probably best for white to make the trade here. Now, we tell the WCA students all the time, don't trade unless you think the trade helps your position. And here, white can make the claim that the trade will help their position, because however black takes back, there's going to be a little something in it for white. So if black takes with the pawn, you're going to see that you've already damaged the black pawn structure very early in the game. The way black took back in the game was with the queen. And your first reaction would be, well, that trade helps black because you developed the queen. But in this position, it's not really true, because the queen is going to get attacked pretty quickly. And the most natural way to attack that queen would be with this bishop. You can't do it right now because she'll just take you. But white gets to play a very natural developing move, knight f3, which prepares to put the bishop here next, gaining some time on the queen. You're going to kick her around a little bit. Now, to prevent that, black would have to play the move h6 in this position. It's playable. It certainly keeps the bishop off that square, but try to think from other discussions in class how that may not be the way black wants to play. Remember, they have less space, number one, but you're also playing the black pieces, which means you started this game a tempo behind white. So when you have to play moves like h6, which really don't help develop pieces, you're almost asking for trouble here. You're just giving white a chance to develop another piece. So black plays, well, I don't know, kind of a risky way here, and says to white, okay, not a problem. I don't care if you attack my queen. I'm going to bring a piece into the battle. I'll play bishop to d6, and I'll let you attack my queen, which he does. He plays bishop to g5, and the queen has really two choices here. She can go to g6, or as in the game, she went to f5. Now in this position, after queen f5, white is going to take advantage of the placement of the queen. So, you know, at any point you can stop the video and be prepared to figure out some of these moves on your own. So a nice hint for that is, as if you're watching this on a tablet or a computer, know where your pause button is. So you can even hover your mouse cursor over the pause button at all times. So whenever you feel, or if you've been asked to stop the video, you can instantly get there without missing anything. So you can pause the video and find white's next move. Pretty clear. Bishop to d3 gets that piece out for free. It's gaining time. And again, I'll give you a different version of that meaning. When it was white's turn here, white got to do something that improved their position. The bishop comes out. It's controlling these diagonals, and you've also allowed the king, if he wants to castle on the very next move. That helps white. Black's turn. Can black play a similar type move? And the answer is no. Black has to move the queen. Black would like to castle, for example, maybe bring this bishop to d7 and into c6 to activate that piece, knight c6. There's a lot of things black would like to do, but they can't because the queen is being attacked. So I hope that helps you guys understand what we mean by losing time. Now, she had a couple of choices here. Playing a move like queen to g4, coming into your opponent's position with the queen, is okay in this position, but let's say black castles and you kick our bishop away and the bishop goes to e3 and then you castle as black. You know, a typical idea for white in this kind of position would be a move like c4, which would gain more space here, control lots of squares, and it's not really a problem right now for white to have this queen so close to their position because she can't work with any of the other pieces. You can't create a battery so easily against this pawn with this bishop and queen. The rest of your pieces are pretty much out of play, so these positions are pretty pleasant for white. So that's why back here, when the queen first got attacked, the player with the black pieces decided to give a check. Now, this is a very important moment in the game, especially for you guys who are rated under 1200 or so, you know, anywhere in that range. You have a lot of legal moves to get out of check. Most of them are not good. They're just downright bad. For example, if you moved your knight here to block the check, you would just give up your bishop. Keep an eye on that. That queen is still in the game and very active. The more sensible moves would be something like bishop to d2, hitting the queen again, getting her to move, you know, say queen to b6, and, you know, maybe we could play our pawn duo again, and I'll highlight that for you. You can see all those squares that those pawns are controlling, so this would be pleasant for white to play from this position. So bishop d2 certainly makes sense. A mistake that a lot of scholastic players would make in this position would be the move queen to d2, offering a queen trade. Most players with the black pieces, I think, would be happy to not only see this offer, but to accept it. And by trading queens, you're giving up your advantage as white, the one that you earned by getting a lead in development. I mean, you got to bring these minor pieces out so quickly. If you trade the queens, then your most powerful attacker is coming off the board, as well as black's, but your chance for a successful attack really was reduced. You'll see if you look up the board that the black king is still in the middle of the board, but with the queens off, it's really not going to be a problem, and it's going to be much, much easier to defend. So going back to the check, knowing that you don't want to trade queens, how would you get out of check? Well, in the game, white simply plays pawn to c3 and tells black, okay, let me see how you're going to set up your pieces. So black plays knight to d7, and that allows this knight here to come over to f6 at some point, or maybe into b6. It has a couple of options. The knight supports the move c5, pawn to c5, which might attack white's center at some point in the game. And then white has a choice here of what to do. A very natural move is to play the move b4, attacking the queen. Say she goes to b6 again and we castle. Again, you have a pleasant position here as white. You've gained space on this side of the board. Your king is safe. You still have a little bit of a lead in development. Looks good. There's nothing wrong with playing that way. But in the game, after knight d7, white decides to just castle, not move any more pawns, complete its development, and more importantly, right away give this rook something to do. You'll notice with the mouse cursor, the e file is half open. There are no white pawns on that line, which means a rook or a queen on this line would put pressure immediately on the black position. So if you played b4 instead, it's certainly fine to do that, but you're taking a little extra time before getting these powerful pieces to this middle line. So that's why white in this position ignored the pawn move and simply castled. Okay, black, I think, felt a little uncomfortable with the queen here, because if these pawns start marching up the board, she could get trapped in this box here that I'm kind of making a little circle around. And if she gets caught in there, there's the likelihood that she may have to give herself up for a lower value piece. So for that reason, black plays the move c6, and that gives the queen an escape route back into her position. Well, white's turn. Rook e1, as we discussed, and rook e1 lines up with the enemy king, puts pressure on this pawn here, and this is where so many tactics come up. Whenever you have a pinned piece like this, a pawn, or if you have a lead in development, you have to be very, very careful as the opponent that white here doesn't pull a trick on you. So here black decides to tuck the queen in right away, and I thought this was kind of cute, because that square that I just highlighted for you is where the queen started the game, and it took her 4 moves to get here. She took on f6 when we traded knights. Then she was attacked by this bishop, so she moved to f5. Then she was attacked by this bishop. She gave a check, and then she tucked herself in here to avoid that potential danger. But you have to be careful playing this way. We used to tell students, we still do actually, always look at your notation pad. If you notice that you're notating lots and lots of pawn moves in the opening, or lots and lots of queen moves, you're running into the danger of moving the same piece too many times, or especially moving too many pawns. So in this position, the black queen actually moved 4 times to go to a square where it really should have only taken her 1 move to go. Okay, so here is where we wanted to start the discussion with the students of what to do. A lot of kids get confused in positions like this because the opening for white is pretty much over. I mean, you've castled your king, you've even moved a rook to an open file. You have all your minor pieces developed, you've made 1 fair trade, your pawn structure looks good, and now comes the question of, well, what am I supposed to do from here? Well, one hint is, if you look at this pawn chain here, and you'll notice this is the bottom of the chain and this is the top. If you look at the top of your pawn chain in a game and pretend that it's an arrow, the chain is pointing toward the black king side. And the reason this could be a nice hint is everything to the right of these pawns in this kind of area in here belongs to white. It's much easier for white to gain or to maneuver their pieces in this zone. So a good rule of thumb is to play on the side of the board where you have the most space. it doesn't mean you'll never play on the other side. Sometimes you'll have to defend something that your opponent's doing there, or you may just find something to do on a side of the board where you don't have space. But as a general rule, play on the side of the board where you have space. So white plays a very interesting move here. He plays queen to e2. And what that does is it forms one battery instantly, and I'll highlight that for you. And a battery is simply when two pieces that move the same way line up together and kind of double the power that the original piece had. So here, there's one rook on this line. When you play queen to e2, you have double the power, and that's pointing at the black king, which can create several problems. So black, to get out of the way, castles. And now we'll start to see white take advantage of their space. And again, if you were having trouble in these positions, I hope you understood why queen e2 was played. It not only connected the rooks, but it allows the queen to work in an area where you have more space. Okay, now queen e2, when it formed this battery, also created the potential for another battery. And go back to the definition of a battery. When two or more pieces line up together, they work on the same line. It doesn't have to be a file. It doesn't have to be a rank. It can also be a diagonal. So white plays queen e4 with the threat of checkmate on h7. And this is beautiful coordination between the white pieces. Very difficult for black to play from here because of the pressure that white's putting on the position. Okay, problem number one. How do we stop the checkmate? Well, we have several choices, and really only one of them is going to work. If you play in this position the move f5, f5 is going to get you in trouble because you're going to lose this pawn with check instantly. But the reason we're going to show you a little more from this move is because there are some tactical patterns that come up that very strong players would just ignore because they know that they're good. But as we're getting better at chess, it's worth the time to kind of go over these things yourself. So if you have a chessboard set up and you're going over this video, play the move f5 and then take the pawn check. And stare at the position for a while and begin to get an appreciation for the attack that you're going to get from this. Well, to get out of check, black could move the king or play the move rook f7. If they move the king, this is where, again, new players have trouble continuing an attack. I want to show you the move bishop to e7, which hits the rook up there on f8, and at the same time hits this bishop twice. Not very easy for black to handle these positions, because if you trade, which seems to be the most natural thing to do, then when you take back, you're going to notice that you've put a little bind on black. And what we mean by a bind is, think of yourself being tied up. You have some problems here. You can't move this knight, because if you move this knight, you're going to lose the rook, checkmate. It's very hard if you can't move this knight to get the rest of your pieces out. So white would be doing really, really well here. So going back to this check, the other way to get out would be to block the check with the rook. Now here is also a little study in tactics. Black just walked into a pin. This is a pin, right? You have a piece here that's not allowed to move because you'll expose the king to check. So to take advantage of a pin, we teach students to attack the pinned piece again. And to do that in this position, we could just play bishop to c4, which is going to give you a great position, probably just winning. You have to protect that rook. It's attacked twice. A move like knight f6 allows your queen here as black to protect, but if that happens, you just simply take the rook check, queen takes, bishop takes check, king takes, and white is winning because you have an extra exchange, and we'll go over that again in class, what an exchange is. It basically means when you have a rook's advantage for a minor piece. So if I win your bishop, but you win my rook, in chess language, we would say that you just won the exchange. If I purposely give up my rook for a minor piece, then we would say that I sacrifice the exchange. So think of it for now that the expression the exchange means rook for minor piece. So this is very good for white. Okay, so back to rook f7. What to do? Bishop c4, when it comes, is creating that threat, and I showed you that it's going to lead to a really good position. But let me show you something else here, very interesting. After rook f7, a stronger move, and these are very difficult to find, is a move like bishop e7. And the idea of bishop e7 is to put something in between the queen and this rook. And the purpose of doing that is when you get to take this rook, it's going to be check, and you might generate an attack against this king. Well, it looks like just a bad move because black can take it right away, and it looks like you just gave a piece away. But now playing bishop c4 is even stronger than it was before because there's an extra piece in between the protection of the queen there. So a move like knight e5 looks really good here because you're exposing this bishop to your queen. So you can't take the rook now with the queen because the knight will defend it. But here you just simply take the knight, and you're going to get the same kind of position you had before. This rook's not running away, so you're going to win the exchange, and white's pieces are just dominating the position. So what I'd like you to do, if you have the time, is go back to this position when black blocks the check with the rook, and if you have the time and you're ambitious enough, you can play around with the different defenses that black has and the attacks that white have, and you'll find that you'll get a lot out of it. You really, really will. Okay, so let's go back for a moment to the queen e4 move. So after the threat of checkmate. So f5, we just looked at, is going to lead to a lot of trouble for black. The other one is knight f6, and that's really bad because the knight does defend the pawn here that's being attacked, but you just take it with the bishop. And black can't take back because of checkmate. You just take the pawn here on h7. So in this variation, black loses a piece for nothing, and they still have the same problem they had a minute ago. Okay, so I hope you found, after this move, queen e4, black's best defense, which was pawn to g6. Now, pawn to g6 stops the threat, but I want to show you a little highlight here. By moving the pawns all to the light squares, as these pawns are here, this diamond shape or arrowhead creates holes on the dark squares, and that's something you should never forget. So if I highlighted all the light squares, you'll see the arrowhead that we were talking about. The white squares for white are incredibly strong because every one of these pawns are fighting for light squares. Pawns attack diagonally, and even this pawn here on e6. Every one of these pawns are on light squares. Well, that means there's got to be some holes in the dark squares. That pattern, once you learn it, becomes a trigger for players. And what I mean by trigger is it kind of signals to the player where to go and how to play. If my opponent is strong on the light squares, then maybe I can attack them on the dark squares. And that's exactly what white does. They play queen h4, and the purpose of this move is to threaten to come in here. And if you get the opportunity to put this bishop here, you're going to have a checkmate on g7. And from where you're sitting, you might say, hey, wait a minute, you can't play bishop f6 because black can always take it. That's true, but that means black can never move this knight. Or they're going to have to move pawns in front of their king. That's really the only way to keep these pieces from coming in further. Well, if you keep this knight on d7, it's going to make it very difficult for black to continue their development. They're going to have to start pushing pawns on the side of the board here to get their pieces out. Could black hang on? Maybe, sure, but I wouldn't want to be black. I'd much rather be white with all this space and weak squares to play with. So black, after queen h4, plays the move rook e8, which does a couple of things. It may allow this bishop to come in here to f8, cover some of these dark squares. Sometimes if there was pressure on this square, maybe not in this position, but the knight could come into f8, which would free this bishop, cover this square, and also leave a square for the king. It's not the best situation for black, but the purpose of the move is to give the other pieces some space. Now, very, very cool move and very hard to find in the game. White has enough pressure on the black king, but there isn't anything clear of how to continue. We know that if this knight stays here on f6, we may not want to put our bishop in there because he'll just trade it off and get rid of one of the attackers of the dark squares. So we have to do something here as white that helps improve our position but doesn't give black a chance to make a trade. So you can pause the video and see what you find. And white plays rook e4. This is known as a rook lift, and the rook later could slide over this way, support the queen on this square, and also by lifting from the bottom will allow this piece, which is the last piece in the attack, to enter the game. And here black kind of gives into the pressure. He maybe could have played pawn to b6 to move this bishop into the game, connecting his rooks. It may have been the better defense, but he comes up with an idea to play the bishop to this square and to get his knight into the middle of the board, still covering the f6 square. But it turns out to be a really bad mistake. He plays knight to b6. And by playing knight to b6, he allows white to post the bishop on f6, not only dominating these squares, but setting a deadly trap that he missed. Now, black thought he can get away with that by following up with knight to d5, which hits the bishop. They would love to trade for this piece. If the queen took, you can put your bishop in here, maybe guard some of these squares, and you might be able to hold on for a while. You might even be able to come in here and offer a queen trade. But it turns out that knight to d5 loses on the spot. You can pause your video and let me know what you come up with. Okay, hope you found it. Ouchie. Queen h7. You give up a whole queen, but the game is over. There's no defense. If you move your king, I'm going to checkmate you in one move, and the more obvious question would be, well, what if I just take the queen? But that unfortunately runs into mate in two. Rook h4, and wherever the king goes, I guess that's the only move. That's a pretty famous checkmate pattern. Okay, so I would go over this game again if you have the time, and most importantly, if you really are ambitious and you have a lot of time, take it to this position again, where we threaten the checkmate. And after queen e4, you might want to go over the move f5 again, which again we already told you it's not good for black. It's obviously bad, but hiding inside this position are a lot of attacking ideas that you can kind of figure out for yourself. Okay? All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Bring your books into class on Sunday so we can check them, and we'll see you then.